How we doing today, Gacha Gang? It's Kawaii50 here with another FGO video, and gang, I have made a promise to my Discord that this would be the next video, and I gotta be honest, gang, I try to be a man of my word as much as I can. So, absolutely, today, we are gonna be talking about Enkidu. We're going to be going over Enkidu's stats, some of the best craft essences to give Enkidu, some of the best command codes, skill order, the whole 9 yards. And if this video helps you out, well, I would appreciate it if you chucked me a like, maybe subscribe to the channel, and told me about your experiences with Enkidu. Let's get started. So probably the first thing you will notice about Enkidu is that their deck is strange. 3 quick cards, 1 arts card, and 1 buster card with a buster noble Phantasm. With an emphasis on so many quick cards, we really want that star generation to be really good, and Enkidu has a pretty decent star generation at 12%, so that is super nice. When we're looking at HP and attack, Enkidu's max HP is off the charts. 15,300 at max level ends up making them one of the highest HP servants in the game. Checking Game Press stats, is sitting at about a 13, including all the JP stuff. When we're looking at their max attack, we've got a 10,780, which sets them at 80. But remember, Lancers have a small passive attack increase, so it actually ends up coming out to a little bit higher. NP per hit on Enkidu is okay as well at a 0.53%. The single arts card can be iffy, but you've got a lot of those quick cards to compensate, so you aren't going to end up having too many issues with Noble Phantasm. And we're going to head directly into servant skills because Enkidu's first and only class skill is not really worth mentioning. We're going to start off with Transformation Rank A. This increases their buster card effectiveness by 30 to 50%, and it also has a random chance to increase their arts or quick effectiveness by 30 to 50% as well. Now, with Enkidu having 3 quick cards, you're gonna want to hope that they end up increasing their quick effectiveness, not only for the sake of overall consistency, but for the sake of critical star generation as well. This is on a pretty solid 5-turn cooldown, so even though it lasts a single turn, if you end up fighting in a longer form challenge quest, they're going to get a lot of opportunities to use transformation. Definitely max this first. This is their primary source of damage. Enkidu's second skill after they perform their rank up quest is Presence Detection Rank A++. This decreases the critical rate of one single enemy by 30 to 50%, removes all of their evasion buffs, and also gives Enkidu a 1-turn evade. I always say that critical chance reduction is a fairly underrated debuff for opponents. It has saved my butt more often than not when it comes to challenge quests. And with Enkidu being such a challenge quest focused servant, a lot of people's favorites for solo runs, this skill ends up being pretty invaluable. It was invaluable before, and it's even more invaluable now that it's got the evade, giving Enkidu a little more survivability. Max this skill second. Now, we're going to want to level this final skill last, but that doesn't change the fact that this skill is pretty mired in absurdity. Enkidu's perfect form rank A recovers between 5,000 to 10,000 HP and removes all of their debuffs. Now, this is on a pretty beefy 10-turn cooldown, so that is the main reason we're going to want to focus on leveling this up last. The cooldown is still going to be absolutely insane, regardless of how much you invest in this skill. But a 10,000 HP recovery is pretty much going to heal Enkidu to full at almost all times. This skill is part of the reason Enkidu is so great for solo runs. I don't really got much more to say other than that. Enkidu's Noble Phantasm is their own brand of Enuma Elish, and I am going to be reading to you the rank up variation, which ETA on that is 8 of 2021, but I'll go over the changes as I'm reading it. So Enkidu's Noble Phantasm upgrade deals 800 to 1200% damage to a single enemy. This is a 200% increase over what we have on NA at this time. It also has a 500% chance to inflict stun on an enemy with the Divine trait, and the enemies with Divine trait are honestly pretty numerous in FGO, a lot more numerous than you might think. So in a lot of challenge quests, you will get this stun off, and it will help you immensely. Also on Overcharge, this decreases the enemy's defense by 30 to 50% for 3 turns, and it activates first, as all good Noble Phantasm debuff skills do. When you upgrade this Noble Phantasm, you will deal an extra 200% special attack damage to Threat to Humanity enemies. Now, this is the iffy little bonus, because even on JP right now, the Threat to Humanity enemies are minimal. We're talking Mecha Ellie-chan, Abigail Williams, Hokusai, and Yang Guifei. That is it. So Enkidu is a good choice to bring along to fights against those characters, but you won't see this extra damage increase happening too often against your run-of-the-mill enemies. Now, with how overall scattered Enkidu's deck ends up getting, I would not recommend a card effectiveness craft essence on them at all. I would recommend overall more generic buffs, NP damage being your primary focus, because let's be real, Enuma Elish is going to get those numbers up there. And with their ability to recover massive amounts of HP thanks to their final skill, the Black Grail is a perfect pick for Enkidu. You are not going to miss that 500 HP you're losing every single turn, because they're just going to gain it right back. Of course, we've got to mention the general powerful pick for all attack type servants, Golden Sumo Boulder Tournament. That general attack increase is going to do wonders for Enkidu. They are just going to see a massive damage increase all around without having to rely on certain cards showing up in their deck. And that 50% starting NP gauge does not hurt either. Now, if you're bringing them along to fight divine enemies, maybe it's a challenge quest or something like that, you also can't go wrong with Fondant au Chocolat. This is the premier divine slaying craft essence, and if you couple that with the general damage increase Enkidu gets against divine servants, you are going to have an incredibly tanky divine slayer servant. Enkidu is going to do wonders, pretty much Karna tier in all honesty. In fact, in some situations, maybe even better than Karna. And for a final craft essence bonus pick, if you really want to play around with their third skill, I can definitely recommend Present for my master. This increases Enkidu's critical star gather rate, so since Lancers have a mediocre star gather, this is going to make sure more of those stars flow into Enkidu to generate more stars, deal more damage, and gain more Noble Phantasm. But on top of that, it's going to increase their HP recovery amount by 40 to 50%, so you're going to be getting some truly insane heals off of Enkidu's third skill. It just makes them one of the ultimate survivability servants. When it comes to Enkidu's supporter allies, you of course cannot go wrong with Merlin and Waver. I might even honestly pick Waver over Merlin in a lot of situations, just because, as we previously discussed, Enkidu has a very scattered deck, and the more general buffs end up helping them compared to the Buster focus buff that Merlin has. But that bonus HP you get from Merlin's Buster buff, that's going to help a lot with the survivability. So if you have both of these servants, chuck them up with Enkidu, and you are going to see Enkidu be a total survivability, tanking, damage-dealing monster. Now, I've got 4 more recommendations for servants you can pair Enkidu with, mainly focused around boosting Enkidu's NP damage. But I will give you a disclaimer, you have to be prepared to deal with the fact that a lot of critical stars are not going to be funneled to Enkidu unless you are giving Enkidu a star gather craft essence, because these servants just end up having a higher overall star weight. Let's of course start with the freebie servant that is very popular at the time of this video, Attila the Santa. Attila the Santa is not only able to increase Enkidu's NP strength, but can also grant Enkidu an NP gauge steroid, and on top of that, increase Enkidu's critical star drop rate. With 3 quick cards in Enkidu's deck, they are actually going to benefit very well from this buff. Sticking with our freebie servant trend, I also want to mention Santa Nightingale, who can be a very powerful ally for Enkidu, mainly because of her first 2 skills. Assault Medicine rank C removes 1 buff from all enemies, 1 debuff from all allies, and also recovers all allies' HP by 1 to 3,000. So having that additional HP recover, considering Enkidu's own HP recover is on such a long cooldown, is going to help out with their survivability. Further helping Enkidu's survivability is Nightingale's second skill, which can give Enkidu guts, increase their buff removal resist, and also increase their NP strength by a 20 to 30%. If you end up coupling that with a Black Grail, you are going to see Enuma Elish put out work against whatever single target enemy was unlucky enough to get in Enkidu's way. I feel Da Vinci Rider is worth a mention, mainly because of Da Vinci Rider's third skill. Increase Enkidu's NP strength by 20 to 30% with this skill, increase Enkidu's NP gauge by 10%, and also increase Enkidu's NP overcharge level by 1. This is going to affect the defense reduction on Enuma Elish and not only increase Enkidu's overall damage, but all of your allies' damage as well. And finally, Abigail Williams can also be a really good pick, especially if, say, you're fighting a challenge quest run that has some berserkers before your main boss. Faithful Prayer is going to grant Enkidu NP gauge 30% over the course of 3 turns and also increase their NP strength. Always something good to have. Mass Hysteria is a pretty fun debuff. It's a little more RNG based, but what isn't RNG based is the 10 to 20% defense reduction. If you end up coupling that with Enkidu's Noble Phantasm, your overall team is going to deal a lot more damage. Witch Trials, of course, is nice. You might be able to decrease an enemy's NP gauge and make sure that Enkidu maybe has a little more time to recharge on Perfect Body. Enkidu's spread out deck and varied kit gives us a few options for command codes. Chains of Heaven is pretty much a must-have in my opinion. This increases the damage against divine enemies by 20%, and on top of that, it has Enkidu on it. So it makes sense that Enkidu would go well with their own command code. I can also wholeheartedly recommend Linchpin of Heaven, increasing all damage against servants except those who are unaffected by Enuma Elish by 20%. The servants affected by Enuma Elish are varied, so you're going to get an overall damage bump by equipping this on Enkidu. Godbinding Chains is also good. It's basically a less strong version of Chains of Heaven. This only increases damage against divine enemies by 15%, but still a divine damage increased. That is nice. As always, with this being an NP damage focused servant, I've got to mention Da Vinci Chan. NP damage up by 15% for 1 turn when attacking using the engraved card. Yes, you have to use the engraved card first, but the NP damage increase is well worth the trade-off. There are also 2 powerful HP recovery focused command codes I want to mention for Enkidu. With Enkidu's Perfect Body ability, any extra HP recovery is going to pay off for them far more than it will on any other servant. And that is what leads me to recommend Good Wife Wise Fox. This will grant Enkidu healing received up by 50%. So just like we mentioned with that one craft essence, granting a healing received boost is going to make Perfect Body just heal Enkidu to full HP every single time. And finally, I do want to mention Maiden of Orleans. This command code will only proc once every 3 turns, but it will recover 1000 HP when Enkidu attacks using the engraved card. This is a nice little way to buff Enkidu's HP recovery, especially with Perfect Body being on such a long cooldown. That little extra survivability is going to give you that little extra time to use Perfect Body again and again. Overall, when it comes to Enkidu, I gotta say they are a very powerful sustained survivability pick with a very powerful Noble Phantasm. But like other servants, they do still have their weaknesses, their main weakness being the fact that their deck is not super focused. So you can't really focus on one single card type to achieve an overall powerful result. You really need to give them more generalized buffs and build their team around them. However, they are still a very, very powerful solo servant, one you can bring along to challenge quests and be sure that you can reliably clear it with just them in your party. I say Enkidu is a very powerful pick for anyone looking for a strong single target Lancer. But of course, I want to know what you all think, so please give me your thoughts on Enkidu down in the comment section below. Let me know if there are any other characters you are using with Enkidu. Let me know if there's a fancy craft essence or command code you might be using on them. And if you're summoning for Enkidu on their banner that's up at the time of this video, let me know if you pulled them. I've got my Enkidu from a GSSR summon back in the day, and I'm very, very happy to have them on my team. This is Kawaii50, hoping you all have a phenomenal day. I'll see y'all in the next video.